I have with me today Areli from, and I wrote this down, Evolve HR and Leadership Consulting. Areli is what you're like a 17, 20-year HR veteran, and we got together maybe like a month or two ago and had a car coffee chat. And from that discussion, we're like, okay, we probably should share this, record this and share it because the information that you shared for businesses really of from startup size to 500 plus employees is just, it's so crucial. So I will have you introduce yourself and then we're just gonna coffee car chat this again.
Yes. I am, as you mentioned, this year is my 18th year in HR as an HR professional. I started very young out of college, and I have been working in HR since then. 2 years ago, I decided to launch my own consulting firm. So I am the founder of Evolve HR and Leadership Consulting. And part of the reason why I decided to launch Evolve HR is because I saw a need, especially in our Spanish speaking community. And so I wanted to build a business that supports all business owners, but also that it's sustainable and it really takes the guesswork out of HR because it could get complex with the evolving laws that we have. I always love questions that I get asked about HR because it has been evolving, and that's something obviously that's going to come up in this conversation. But I appreciate the inquiry and also the education that you are providing through your platform. It's really important, especially when there's a lot of information. You know, we have access to a lot of information online, but sometimes it could get a little lost or confusing. So I appreciate the space and your curiosity to learn more about HR.
Yeah, and one of those was I remember when I was like, yeah, so what's like something someone should think about when they're hiring their very first employee, like employee number one. And you just shared like, oh, well, these five laws apply to them right away. So can you walk us through that? Maybe take that example because some of our business owners are startups and maybe they're doing it on their own for the first year, 2 years, or 3 years, but there's gonna come a point, especially if they want to grow and build their business where they're going to want to hire employee number one. So
Yes.
what's that going to look like?
Yes. And it's such an important question because when you become, you go from a business owner really, and then you start being the employer, right? It's such a big milestone for the business leader. Hiring your first employee, it's such an important step, and also a big shift because you're someone's employer, you are someone's leader, and also keeping in mind all the paperwork and legalities behind it. And even if you have one employee, there's a couple of laws that apply depending on the state that you live. So one of the first things that I always tell business owners is, let's get to the basics, right? There is a legal basic to hiring your first employee. That involves making sure that you have the system to run your first payroll. So that's one of the first things that I usually mention is, do you have a system to run your payroll? It could be in-house, it could be in-house, or it could be a solution, a partner that you work with. If you have your workers' comp in place, and then also making sure that you know the classifications, because you might be hiring a part-time employee, you might be hiring a full-time employee, you might need temporary help, so you may need a contractor, right? You may need a temporary employee. So knowing and understanding the classifications as well, a 1099 versus a W-2,
Mhm.
because there are differences with paperwork, and then also it has to be classified following the norms of what is considered a 1099 and what is considered a W-2. That
Yeah.
that's the basics, but there's definitely more than that.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. And I'm gonna write that down because I do want to come back to that W-2 versus W-9. But so I want to kind of like make this like a journey. So I have employee number one. What's the next threshold of employee numbers where there's like more HR compliance or
Yeah.
knowledge that needs to be known?
Yes, it's usually around headcount 10 when you have additional laws that apply. And again, depending on your state, And then we also have to consider not just state laws, but also federal laws, right? So
Mm.
I'm going to give you an example, right? Once you get to 50 and plus, there's more requirements from the federal perspective, because then at that point, for example, if you are an employer who has more than 50 employees, you have to start looking at your FMLA, right? There's more
Mm.
requirements in addition to the headcount, but that's the headcount that they're looking at, right? 50 and plus. Every time that you hire an employee, just be mindful of how many employees you have in your organization. And again, this is W-2 employees, right? We're not talking about 1099 contractors, because a lot of the laws don't apply to 1099 contractors. There are some laws that do. For example, harassment training, regardless if you're a contractor or W-2, there's got to be harassment training here in Illinois, statewide. But most of these laws really apply for W-2 employees.
Okay. Um, the harassment training even if you have subcontractors, you have to.
Yes. Essentially, if you have contractors, temporary employees, interns
Mhm.
that are employing working with you, and the requirement here in Illinois is one training a year for harassment training in the state of Illinois, they would be part of the training as well.
Oh wow.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. So now, because I do work in the construction industry a lot, and they do have a lot of subcontractors. So that's, pay
Yes.
attention, guys and
Yes. At,
gals.
at the end of the day, they want to make sure that everybody who is in that work environment understands that there is a expectation that everybody behaves professionally, free of
Yeah,
harassment. And so that's one of those mandates that they don't exclude. They add in addition to employees, which I
is
think
the
is the right thing to do.
subcontractors.
Everybody
Yeah.
deserves the knowledge and reminder sometimes of what is exactly
Yeah.
harassment, and how to avoid it. In Chicago, there's more requirements with harassment training. You also have to have bystander training. So we were talking about federal law, state law, but there's also some mandates that are specific to your county, or in this case, Chicago. So there are additional requirements for Chicago employers on harassment training, and also in restaurant industry, they also have some more requirements, like the timing of when it needs to be completed. One of the things that I encourage my clients is, we give employees upfront the expectations, the tools, and the knowledge, so that if something comes up, we want them to come to us internally. We want them to come to their manager. We want them to come to HR. We want them to feel comfortable coming to us and having us do an investigation, do our due diligence and a process to understand what happened, if anyone violated the company policies, understanding, where's the gap. A lot of times when this doesn't take place, employees go directly to the outside agency, right? And that at that point, we almost don't have any say in that. That's when, maybe we get a call from the agency and they let us know, hey, somebody has filed a harassment claim. Now us as an employer and business owner, now we have to prove to them, what did we do to avoid this? Right.
Mm.
And so that's when they start asking questions. When did you conduct your last harassment training?
Yeah.
And we don't want to be in a position where we say, well, we didn't provide a harassment training, although we know it's mandatory.
Yeah.
Now, I have to be honest with you, some employers do not know it's a mandatory training. And this is
Hmm.
why it's so important for me to ensure that business owners know that it's a required training. And there are some penalties that you can get into, not only penalties, but also the morale, right? If somebody
Hmm.
feels harassed, if somebody doesn't feel that they've been treating fairly, we don't want no one to feel that way. And we also know that bad news spread more quickly.
Yeah.
So no one wins in this case, in my opinion. Nobody wins. The employee, the employer, nobody wins. There's a lot of time and energy invested in this. When if we were informed about the requirements for business owners, if we provided the education and training, we can definitely avoid more of these
Yeah.
claims.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I actually do see a little bit of overlap between what you're doing with your business owners and then putting into place the EPLI, Employment Practices Liability Insurance, for my clients in the event of those kind of claims so that they have that financial backing for any defense or situation that might come up. And we do ask those questions. Like those are some of the questions in the application is, do you have a written sexual harassment, anti-discrimination workbook or something like that? Or do you do training? And it's all like, yes, no, yes, no. So if there's no's, I'm going to be like, you need to talk to Areli here because you need to have these things in place. What are some of the other, I guess, mistakes that you see from business owners when it comes to like the whole HR component?
Yeah, I think part of it is I call them best practices. I always share best practices. I say, well, these are the best practices. These are our recommendations, and this is why we recommend it, right? And one of the first things I usually recommend is putting expectations in writing. And so even if your company is one employee, I suggest to have an employee handbook, right? Where you set the expectations about your programs and policies for your company, and then you're also consistent because my hope is that as a business owner you continue to grow, so the same information you share with one employee you share with the other employee and so on. And I believe building a culture from even before you hire the employee, the communication that happens before hiring your employee, the pre-onboarding, the recruitment process, really that's how it starts, right? How you communicate with that potential employee. And then when you onboard them, right, you want to make sure that you set this tone on the team that you want to build and have a really great onboarding program for your employees, because it's almost like their first day at school, right? And you want to have them feel welcome and, know who they can reach out to if they have any questions. And then also like think long term. So I like to think about the entire employee life cycle. And I
Mhm.
and like I mentioned, that starts from even before they come on board. So coming up with a recruitment strategy, coming up with an onboarding strategy, coming up with a retention strategy, because I think as business owners, we hope that they stay with us for a very long time, but we also understand that some employees may be with us just for a couple years. So I would encourage everybody to think short term and long term, and then building systems to support your employees' growth and your business growth.
Let's say I'm hearing this for the first time and you're telling me like all these things that I should have in place, even if it's just one employee, like to me, it's going to sound incredibly overwhelming. But this is something that's exactly what you do for your employees, right? Like you help them, you understand what they want to build, like their culture, and then you help them with that recruiting process, that onboarding, like that whole way through, right? Like that's what you guys focus on.
Exactly. Yes. And we help build the foundation because a lot of times there is no foundation, right? Because maybe they didn't have an employee before, or maybe they're in growth mode. And so now they need those systems. Maybe they need them. So I like to meet them where they are. And then work with them on where they are, what their headcount is, and what they anticipate to do in the next 6 months and 1 year. Because, we have some clients who go from one employee to 10 employees in 1 year, and that's a
Mhm.
that's a big shift.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe like you even had that personally, right? Like within your own business as you're merging two companies together. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and maybe
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, and I also want to say I'm so happy to be on this call with you today because today is HR International Day. uh,
Woo!
yes. And so because HR has been part of my life for 18 years, this is a topic that I feel very comfortable talking about. But yes, you are right. So last year was um, a very learning year for me, because what happened is I've been working in HR for 18 years, but I've been working in consulting for 10 years. And I was working under my mentor who gave me an opportunity to start HR consulting. I started HR consulting when I was in the middle of my what do you call it? I was like raising three kids under 4 years old. So
Oh my gosh.
I needed a little flexibility. So I decided to try consulting, completely new to me, but with the help of this HR professional who already had his HR consulting firm. It's interesting because I just reached out to him. I didn't know him. I just found him online. I was searching consulting firms around the area where I lived. I reached out to him and I said, I was wondering if you need any HR help. I'm happy to meet with you and interview with you. I like to do part-time HR consulting because that was my capacity with
Yeah.
three kids under four. And yes, he said, let's meet up. I've been needing help. So that's how my consulting journey started. 2 years ago, he retired, and I took the decision to buy his company. And at the same time, I also had already started with Evolve HR. So last year, it was about merging systems, continuing the legacy that he left behind, because I learned a lot from him, but also updating a lot of the systems in place. He had been in the business for 20 years. And I would say the last 10 years, there was really no updates to the systems. Rightfully so, as a business owner, he was wearing many hats. So last year, it was about looking at the systems. How can I optimize those systems? How can I enhance them? And how can I continue to use systems and processes to help our new clients? And
Hmm.
then so many things have evolved from 10, 20 years ago. I wanted to make sure that Evolve HR really was there to provide the tools and also have a foundation and something that was sustainable for the world that we live in today.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember when we were talking about that and you were sharing with me like your own business growth. And I know that also led to like even more questions. I'm like, oh, let's talk about this. Let's talk about because right, so we'll have our startups, right? And then they'll hire employee number one, and then they keep hiring more. But there are some business owners that are going to do what you're doing, exactly what you're doing. They're going to see an opportunity to purchase an existing business that will either enhance what they're already doing or help them capture more market, whatever it is. But there's things that come along with that. So obviously, you're going through it firsthand. How do you help your clients navigate that through that too?
Yeah, so I think with mergers and acquisitions, there's definitely the legality piece, and I definitely recommend partnering with an attorney that specializes in that. I actually have a great resource. I'm more than happy. Actually, I want to share her name with.
Yeah,
I
go
think we
ahead.
both know her, right? It's
We
Noemi
do.
Sedna. She's definitely a great support when it comes to that type of information and contracts. So I actually did reach out to her just to understand a little bit about, hey, to what you were saying, a lot of this stuff is new, right? Like we don't understand the core of. I mean, we understand, even us as professionals, right? We
Mhm.
also need help with understanding these contracts, and so I would say Noeli would be a great partner to do that if you are thinking about acquisitions. And then from the HR perspective, yes, there is a checklist that I actually go through, similar to what you do, right? You ask the
Mhm.
questions of, yes, no. But some of those questions involve understanding the organization that you are going to acquire, kind of going through the same process. Do they have a handbook? How many employees do they have? Headcount, right? Headcount is very important to know what laws apply, what state they work in. Sometimes they have employees that work in a different state. We also got to know that as well. So we go through a Q&A process to really understand where they fall and understand what are the compliance piece first, right? We want to make
Yeah.
sure that the foundation does start with their compliance. And then, we also ask as well any business information that they want to share that, might be part of the process. So, for example, if they're thinking of keeping their employee headcount from the previous organization, are they going to expand? Is there going to be any employee impact, right? Any action items that need to be done. And then, then we go through the basics of what we talked about, the onboarding, making sure that everybody has a onboarding program to the new organization. I have to admit there are some pain points, right? There are some pain points, of course, with growth, but that is exactly why I think it's important to have resources, especially the ones that we provide, Spanish and English, because a
Mhm.
lot of times this information is new, especially in our Spanish community. And what I've seen is that there really is not a lot of tailor businesses for the Spanish community. One of the things that I find very rewarding working in HR as a bilingual professional is that in my time as an HR professional for 18 years, I've had I've been exposed to having to conduct sexual harassment investigations. And there was an occasion where a victim uh, informed me that she had not made a claim about her harasser because she did not feel comfortable speaking to someone who didn't speak Spanish. So, in other words, prior to me getting involved, there was no one in the management team who spoke Spanish, and
Mhm.
that limited her ability to come forward. And so, for me, it's important that there are resources available for communities who are predominantly Spanish speaking. And there's a lot of industries where it's predominantly Spanish speaking. And
Yeah.
so my business, what helps me is that we have those resources, right? So that if somebody believes that the language barrier or the language is a barrier to providing really vital information to their management, that gap is not there, right? We're
Yeah.
there to help. And of course, as HR professionals, we're trained to do these investigations with due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that I think that's a really great example. And I've heard that similarly even in the insurance industry where some people are like, you know what, like I really would like to work with you. I'm having a lot of trouble understanding what I have, what I don't have. I don't even know what questions to ask because I don't really even know what they said to me. And it's just it gives people more clarity into what they're getting into. You know, we're both bilingual and we understand like there are some things that they're just not as easily translatable or they just can't be really translated with the same level of focus that they should be translated in. And so yeah, I think the work that you're doing in this is just so important and so crucial, especially for both languages. Um,
Yeah, no, thank you.
let's go back to that W-2, W-9 question. And well, actually, hold on, before we go back there,
Yeah.
are there any industries that maybe need a little bit more compliance than other industries as far as like HR goes?
That's a great question. And, I feel really grateful that in my time working as an HR consultant, which is now 10 years, I tapped into different industries. And I can tell you that a lot of, I always say like this industry is complex, but then one of the reasons why I love HR consulting is because I do work with different industries. And if you know a little bit about the Strengths Finder, one of my strengths is a learner. And so if I tap into a new industry, to me, the learning piece is just so gratifying, right? But it also helped me be a better business partner because,
Mhm.
for me, understanding your organization in your industry is going to help me make better recommendations that are specific to the industry. And so one of the industries that I felt it was very, it was, it was fun to learn, but it was complex was the trucking industry. It's very
Mhm.
regulated, right? Rightfully so. And then one of the most recent industries also that I've been working with is in healthcare. As we know, that's also very regulated, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And so every industry, I've been finding appreciation, right, for the compliance piece behind it. A lot of it has to do with safety, right? And so I'm not a safety expert, but I have worked with safety managers very closely. I've done also, there was a time where I was the interim safety manager because there was restructure. So I had to step in temporarily. So I learned even more about safety through that. So there's definitely appreciation for these industries. And I almost feel like every industry has its unique elements, and there's a little
Mhm.
complexity around that too, just based on the regulations.
Yeah, 100%. I would say it's like similar for, in the insurance world too. There's some industries that are just very simple and very straightforward, and then there's others that's like, whoa, wait a minute, like let's slow down. There's a ton of things that we need to check the box for before we move on to the next step.
Yes.
So I was wondering if that paralleled in your world where there were some industries, that maybe had more technicalities than other industries. And now let's go back to that W-2, W-9 question. Um, so I know there's sometimes confusion around that. Some people think they have an employee, but they really a W-9, and then sometimes they're under W-9, but they're being treated as a W-2 by the legal terms of what an employee is. To make things simple, let's just focus on the state of Illinois. What would you say or what would you share to someone that's having that question about one, whether to consider adding a W-9 for help or if they should do the W-2 for like employee number one?
Yes. Yeah. And this topic is actually, I think this is one of those topics that sometimes business owners need a little bit more guidance on this.
Mhm.
And so for me, I feel that the differences between W-2 employees and 1099 independent contractors are significant from the legal and operational perspective. So a lot of it really has to do with like the direction and control that you have on the individual. So for example, right, if you have a person and you are telling them like, okay, here's your schedule, these are the things that you have to do, these are the tasks, this is how we should do it, you have a lot of direction and control over that person. So you're treating that person like an employee, right? There's more to dig into, but usually that's like an indication that that's an employee. And then once you have identified that that's an employee, then of course you are responsible for payroll, which is withholding their taxes, federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare, and then covered by the labor laws, right? Like minimum wage, overtime, that type of stuff. And then you have to provide them a W-2 at the end of the year, right? So that they can file, or I'm sorry, in the beginning of the next year, so that they can file their taxes. For 1099, they're self-employed individuals or businesses hired to perform specific tasks or projects. And so we see this like even in trucking, right? In
Mhm.
trucking, we have some independent contractors who have their own trucks, right? And they work with the trucking company, they're self-employed, they control how and when the work is performed. There's no payroll taxes withheld because they're getting paid separately from payroll. They're not eligible for benefits. They're not covered by most employment laws. So there are big differences, from payroll standpoint, operational standpoint. I always suggest for these types of inquiries, have your CPA involved, have your HR involved. Sometimes if you have your attorney, have them involved. Just make sure that everything's good because a lot of it really has to do with what type of work they're doing and how it's being controlled and how the work is
Mhm.
completed.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And to wrap this up, like I do want to point out to all the business owners, like it is hard to do this on your own. And as a business owner, yes, you do wear a ton of different hats. However, surround yourself with a good team. Like you can't do this all by yourself. Like you'll literally drown trying to do this all by yourself. So surround yourself with a good HR consultant, surround yourself with a corporate attorney, your CPA, your insurance professional. And when you're out there looking for these professionals, just make sure that they feel like they're part of the team because you're going to have to bounce ideas off of, whoever the appropriate resources for whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's hiring employees. Okay, well, let's talk to my attorney. Let's talk to my HR consultant. Let's, talk to me too, because I might need to update some things on the insurance program as well. And if you have a good, strong team around you and you share with them what your goals of the dream, what the goals of your businesses are, and I think you said this earlier, you can be more proactive in your business than reactive in what's to come. So I just wanted to make that point because I do see some business owners trying to like just do it out there by themselves, and that's great, but you're going over more hurdles than you really should. Than if you had like people you could just call real quick, like, hey, Adeli, I'm gonna hire my first employee. I'm starting to do interviews. What else do I need to know? You have someone that's literally gonna guide you through that whole process. So I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think it's important for business owners, business leaders, and aspiring, business owners and business leaders to start creating that support system because you
Mhm.
are absolutely correct. You're not going to know all the answers. You're not expected to know all the answers. You can't be the subject matter expert in all areas, right? And that's why it's good to find your team, your support system, your network that aligns with what you're trying to do. And yes, I am so happy to see more of this type of work, like the work that you do. This is something that is foreign to me, like the whole insurance. It's foreign to know the specifics, but to have somebody that you can pick up the phone or email or just kind of bounce an idea, it's so helpful, and I'm glad that I have you as a resource for insurance, but also to share it with others, right, who may need your help. It could get complicated if you kind of do it on your own, and
Yeah.
especially if there's that compliance piece, because the compliance piece is really supposed to help the employer and the employee, right? It's supposed to help both. It's part of what we have to follow, in depending on your state.
Thank you, Areli. I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you sharing the little bits of nuggets with our audience. And, if anyone has any questions that are related to HR, the HR world, whether you're a startup business, you're maybe looking to hire your first employee, maybe you're going into your 10th employee and you need some additional guidance, please reach out to Areli. I'll make sure to include her contact information on this post or in the comments. And other than that, any last words?
No, thank you again for the opportunity. It's such a great day to spend, some of my HR time with you, and I look forward to the next session, hopefully in Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.